When you are in an audience, whether it be for a play, a concert, or a speech, you are listening. And as part of the listening process, you respond. And not just at the end of the presentation, like when you applaud, you are providing feedback all the time, whether you know you are doing it or not. This video lecture is the first of two addressing providing feedback to public speakers and begins with the discussion of listening. We will focus on the importance of listening, types of listening purposes or situations, and then discuss how, as an audience member, you can give nonverbal feedback to speakers. The next video will focus on how to provide verbal feedback, or what some might call constructive criticism. But first, how important is listening? In 1991, the United States Department of Labor issued the SCANS report, published in What Work Requires of Schools. In this report, they identified 5 basic skills they felt were essential to those entering the workforce. Notice that listening is one of those skills deemed critical to success in the workplace. They defined listening as receives, attends to, interprets, and responds to verbal messages and other cues. In numerous studies, listening is at the top of the list of skills employers are looking for in employees. And you probably already know the vital role listening plays in interpersonal relationships. The first step to understanding listening so that you can respond appropriately is understanding the 5 different types of listening situations or purposes. The first is discriminative, when you are identifying and separating sounds, such as the sex of the person speaking, the number of people speaking, what words are being said, and so on. You have to do this in order to move to the next step. I was listening to an audiobook a while back and I heard the reader say mustache. I had to figure out if it was 2 words, mustache, or just one, mustache. Once you've been able to discriminate among the various sounds you are hearing, then you can move to comprehensive listening, also called informational listening, with the primary purpose of understanding and remembering the message. We do this in classrooms, at work, when we listen to instructions, reports, speeches. It requires concentration and memory and is the basis of the next 3 types of listening. Critical listening is also called evaluative listening. This is when we listen to evaluate, to judge, or to assess the value of what we are hearing. You do this when you are trying to figure out if you will accept someone's argument, when you suspect you are listening to a biased source of information, when you're considering the use of evidence and reasoning, and so on. Empathetic listening is also called therapeutic or relationship listening, as it is often used to either help an individual or to improve the relationship between people. You use this listening style when you are trying to demonstrate empathy for the speaker or by being sympathetic. It is often completely opposite of critical listening, since in this case, we are not trying to judge. This type of listening happens when friends and acquaintances want to vent, share emotion, and so on. And it can also happen when listening to a speech. You engage in appreciative listening, also called pleasurable listening, when you are listening for enjoyment, as in music, movies, conversation, and, oftentimes, a speech. As you've probably realized, when listening to a speech, all of these listening situations may come into play. But if you are getting ready to provide evaluative feedback to the speaker, your listening purpose will primarily be critical listening. After you listen, you respond with feedback. What is feedback? Bob Dignanis at the University of Cambridge believes that feedback is just another word for effective listening. First, remember the basic communication model, which, as you'll recall, has a sender who encodes a message that is communicated through a channel to a receiver who decodes it and then provides feedback through a feedback loop. Feedback, then, involves messages sent in response to another's communication. Those messages can be coded verbally and non-verbally and can be sent consciously or unconsciously. When feedback is sent consciously, it is intended to evoke a particular response. If you laugh or chuckle at a story, it may be because you want the speaker to feel you enjoyed the story and hope that he or she will tell more like it. Feedback can also be sent unconsciously, often resulting in unintended or unexpected responses. A yawn might be interpreted as boredom, and we've all seen professors who have interpreted students' behavior as they're not listening to them because their eyes are closed, their face is blank, and so on. I doubt that many students consciously decide to send that message and are surprised then when the professor responds angrily. Remember, we always provide others with feedback, whether we intend to or not. But notice that regardless of whether the feedback is sent intentionally or not, the original sender, or in our case the speaker, will decode that message. Many performers have credited and cursed their audiences, and many people dislike giving presentations only to a camera lens. The loss of direct audience feedback frequently negatively impacts the performance. Another way of looking at this is that the audience, through their feedback, has a direct impact on their own enjoyment of the performance. That's why when you are an audience member, you should consider the nonverbal and often unintentional feedback you may be giving to a speaker. A quick discussion of the do's and don'ts are in order. Quick because you probably already know this, even if you don't practice it. You should actively listen to the speaker and let the speaker know that you are listening by making eye contact, sitting attentively, and displaying appropriate facial expressions, like smiling at humorous points, showing understanding, indicating puzzlement, and so on. In a lot of cases, you are helping the speaker out by communicating that you are understanding or not understanding his or her message. That means you shouldn't fake attention, nor should you allow yourself to be distracted by your electronics. Turn your phone off, or by other work that you might be thinking about, like your speech or homework. That means you should monitor your nonverbal expressions of internal noise. If you are worried or have a headache, try not to show it on your face. In general, don't be rude or distracting, and that includes walking in or out on a speaker while he or she is speaking. Instead, your goal should be to give the speaker as much positive nonverbal feedback as you can. Communicate that you are paying attention and are being affected by the speech. Quiz time! What type of listening purpose are you most likely to use when listening to a speech? How important is your nonverbal feedback to a speaker during a presentation? Best-selling self-help author Bryant H. McGill once said, "One of the most sincerest forms of respect is actually listening to what another has to say." In which case, I appreciate you showing respect to me, listening to me talk about listening and feedback. And now you should know how to demonstrate your respect for other speakers.